I met Samuel on an autumn evening, when the university campus was covered in red maple leaves, and the yellow lights hanging along the paths began to light up. At that time, I didn't think much of it, just a normal group study session in the library, a few hours sitting next to each other amid the smell of old paper and cold coffee. But there are moments that, looking back, we realize are the starting point of a long scratch. Samuel sat across from me, twirling a ballpoint pen, his gaze absent-mindedly drifting out the window. He was a bit taller than me, with broad shoulders and a lean, sturdy build like those guys who grew up with basketball and morning runs. His dark brown hair was always a little messy, as if he'd just rushed from somewhere. I still remember his eyes clearly, pale green but not bright. They carried a quiet weariness, the kind of fatigue from someone who just lost something important. "Spencer." He called my name for the first time, his voice deep and slightly hoarse. "Can you help me with this part? I can't focus." I nodded, pulling the textbook toward me. The distance between us was close enough that I could smell the soap on his wrist, clean and warm. I told myself I was just helping a classmate. I told myself a lot of things in the months that followed. Samuel had just broken up with his girlfriend. The whole school seemed to know. It was a relationship that lasted nearly 3 years, ending at the end of summer. People whispered about old photos being deleted, about arguments in the bar near campus. I heard it all, but I didn't ask. I didn't want to become part of someone else's emotional wreckage. I'd been there before, and I knew how much it hurt. Yet Samuel sought me out. At first, it was late-night texts. "You still up?" Then long calls until 2 or 3 in the morning, when the dorm was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. He talked about the emptiness after the breakup, about how the room felt too big, too cold. I listened, always. Yet Samuel sought me out. At first, it was late-night texts. "You still up?" Then long calls until 2 or 3 in the morning, when the dorm was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. He talked about the emptiness after the breakup, about how the room felt too big, too cold. I listened, always the listener. I was used to that role, the one who stays when others fall apart. "Spencer," he said during one of those calls, his voice low and slow. "I'm so lonely." That sentence was like a thin thread, wrapping around my chest, tightening gradually. I wanted to ask why he didn't turn to closer friends, why me? But I didn't ask. I just replied, "I'm here." We started spending more time together, lunch in the cafeteria, sitting on the steps outside the library, walking around the stadium at dusk. There were times Samuel smiled, a rare but heartbreakingly beautiful smile. There were times he was silent for long stretches, as if struggling with himself. And I, foolishly, began to look forward to those moments. One evening, when the cold wind blew through the campus, Samuel stopped under an old oak tree. The streetlight illuminated his face, highlighting his sharp jawline and tightly pressed lips. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," he said. "After the breakup, everything is a mess." I stood beside him, hands in my jacket pockets, heart beating faster than usual. "You don't need to know everything," I said. "Just take it one step at a time." Samuel turned to look at me. The distance between us was so close I could feel his breath on my cheek. For a moment, I thought he would say something else, a confession or at least a question. But he just sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I only feel at ease when I'm with you," he said. I don't know why. That sentence was both a blessing and a curse. I smiled, but inside, a door had opened. And I knew, once opened, it wouldn't close easily. I didn't tell Samuel how I'd loved someone like that before. I didn't tell him I'd promised myself not to become a temporary shelter for someone else's loneliness. I just stood there, beside him, in the cold night, letting my emotions drift away like the leaves falling at our feet. And deep inside, a question began to form, slowly, painfully. If you're saying you're lonely after the breakup, then why, out of everyone, do you only seek me out? After that night, things between me and Samuel lost their initial innocence. There was no clear acknowledgement, no boundaries drawn, but I felt it. A subtle shift, like when a song slowly changes rhythm and only one person in the room notices. Samuel started appearing in my everyday moments. He sat next to me in morning philosophy class, his leg lightly brushing mine under the desk. It wasn't accidental, I was sure of that, but not clear enough for me to speak up. He sent me photos of gray skies at dusk, with a short line, "The sky matches my mood today," and I, like someone who'd already fallen, always replied. One Friday afternoon, Samuel knocked on my dorm room door. I opened it, and before I could ask, he was standing there with 2 hot coffees in hand. "I thought you needed this," he said, smiling faintly. I stepped aside to let him in. My room was small, cluttered with books and unfolded clothes. Samuel sat on my bed, set the coffee on the desk, his eyes scanning everything as if trying to understand me through the little details. "You're always busy," he said, "but you still make time for me." I shrugged. "You do the same." We sat there in silence for a while. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was thick, full of unspoken things. Samuel leaned back against the wall, his head tilting slightly. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, making his face look softer, less tense. "Spencer," he spoke up slowly, "have you ever felt like you're a replacement?" That question hit me right in the chest. I didn't answer right away. I looked down at my hands, fingers intertwined. "Yes," I said, "and I hate that feeling." Samuel smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I don't want to make you feel that way. Why are you asking?" I turned to look at him. He was silent, then said softly, "Because I'm afraid. I'm leaning on you too much." My heart beat faster. "You can lean," I said, realizing how easily it came out. "As long as you know what you're doing." Samuel turned, his gaze meeting mine, lingering longer than necessary. In that moment, I saw him as if standing on a cliff, between the familiar and the forbidden, between old pain and a new possibility. He reached out, lightly touching my wrist. The touch made me shiver. No one said anything, but the air in the room thickened. I knew I should pull away, say something to break this dangerous moment. But I didn't. "Spencer," Samuel whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." I looked at him, really looked at him. A guy who just lost his old love, lost amid emotions that had never been named. And I realized, in that lostness, he'd found me. We didn't kiss that night. Samuel pulled his hand back first, stood up, said he should go. When the door closed behind him, I sat on the bed, heart still racing. I wondered if I just avoided a mistake or missed an opportunity. In the days that followed, Samuel became more distant, but only on the surface. Texts became fewer, but each one was longer and heavier. He talked about recurring dreams, about waking up in the middle of the night not knowing what he wanted. And then, one evening, he texted, "I miss you." I stared at the words for a long time before replying. "Me too." We met at the empty stadium, where the lights shone down on the cold concrete seats. Samuel sat beside me, shoulder to shoulder. It was windy and cold, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned toward me, resting his head lightly on my shoulder as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You make me feel less lonely," he said softly. I swallowed hard. In that moment, I understood something terrifying. I wasn't just a shelter for his loneliness. I was becoming part of a story he wasn't ready to name. And I, knowing the risks full well, let him stay there. Because part of me wanted to believe that maybe he wasn't seeking me out just because he was lonely. Maybe he sought me out because of me. From the moment Samuel rested his head on my shoulder at the stadium, an invisible boundary was erased. Neither of us voiced it, but we both knew. We were no longer just 2 classmates sharing post-breakup sadness. There was a new undercurrent, simmering and dangerous, weaving through late-night texts and meetings without reason. Samuel started sleeping over in my room. The first time, he said his dorm was too noisy, that he didn't want to be alone. I laid out extra blankets, kept a safe distance, but by midnight, when I turned over, he was lying close. His back was warm, his breathing steady. I lay still, heart pounding, wondering how deep I was stepping. "Spencer," he whispered in the dark, "you still awake?" "Yeah." "Do you think everything would be easier if I didn't feel like this?" I knew what like this meant, but I still asked, like what? Samuel was silent for a long time. I could hear him swallow. Wanting to be close to someone. Not in the way I used to think. I turned to look at him. The faint light from the hallway seeped through the door crack, enough to see the tension on his face. In that moment, I saw he wasn't the strong, confident guy on the basketball court anymore. He was just someone afraid of his own emotions. You don't have to figure it all out right away, I said. Just be honest. Samuel chuckled softly. I'm trying. He reached out, this time without hesitation, placing his hand on my chest. His hand was warm, the pressure just enough for me to feel how fast my heart was beating. I held my breath. One small move and everything would cross the point of no return. But then he pulled back. Sorry, he said. I don't want to hurt you. That sentence hurt more than any touch. I turned my back, closed my eyes, wondering if he realized he'd been hurting me for a while now, just by being so close without daring to take another step. The weeks that followed were a blur of days. By day, we acted like normal friends. By night, Samuel still sought me out. Sometimes just to sit together watching an old movie, sometimes to lie silently on the bed, with a charged space between us. One evening, after I'd finished my shift at the library, Samuel was waiting outside. It was drizzling, water droplets in his hair. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. You okay? I asked. Samuel shook his head. I saw her today. My heart tightened. And? She has someone new, he said, his voice flat. Faster than I thought. We walked in the rain, no umbrella. When we got to my room, our clothes were soaked. Samuel stood in the middle of the room, shoulders slumped. I handed him a towel, but he didn't take it. Instead, he stepped forward and hugged me. The hug was strong and trembling. I felt his body tense, like he was trying to hold something from shattering. I hugged back without thinking. In that moment, I wasn't a friend or a replacement. I was the only one he clung to. Samuel lifted his head. His eyes were red, lips trembling. Spencer, he whispered, I don't want to go home alone tonight. I knew I should say something, a warning, a boundary, but I didn't. I nodded. We kissed for the first time in that cramped room. Not rushed, not awkward. Just an experimental lip touch, as if we were both afraid to break the moment. When his lips met mine, a warm wave spread through me. All doubts, all questions about why he sought me out vanished, at least for a second. Samuel rested his forehead against mine, breaths mingling. I'm sorry, he said. I don't know what I'm doing. I closed my eyes. I know, I replied, but I'm still here. That night, we didn't go beyond the kiss. Samuel slept in my arms, his breathing evening out. I stared at the ceiling, my heart filled with a sweet yet terrifying emotion, because I knew, from this moment, nothing would be simple anymore. And deep inside me, the old question echoed, clearer than ever. If you're only seeking me out because of your pain, then when that pain heals, where will you leave me? After that rainy night, Samuel and I entered a limbo state that neither of us had the courage to name. Not lovers, no longer just friends. We existed in between, where every gesture was more intimate than allowed, but every word was cautious like walking on thin ice. Samuel stopped mentioning his ex, at least not directly, but I knew the pain was still there, hidden under long silences, unexplained sighs. He was with me more, breakfast before class, sitting next to me in the library, sleeping over almost every weekend. His body became familiar to me in a frightening way. Some nights, he wrapped his arm around my waist in sleep, like it was a natural reflex. And I let it happen. One afternoon, as we sat on the grass behind the social sciences building, Samuel suddenly asked, Have you ever thought about leaving this school? I turned to look at him. What do you mean? I mean, starting over somewhere else. He gazed into the distance. A place where no one knows who I used to be. That sentence sent a chill down my spine. I understood the implication. Samuel was looking for an escape. Not just from old pain, but from the emotions budding between us. You want to run away? I asked. Samuel smiled faintly. Maybe. What about me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Samuel was silent. He looked at me for a long time, as if weighing each word. Spencer, you're the best thing that's happened to me during this time. During this time. Those 3 words were like a dull knife. I nodded, pretending not to hear. I understand. But I didn't. Or maybe I understood too well. Things started cracking from small details. Samuel avoided holding hands when others were around. He never called me by any term that could be misinterpreted. When I asked how he felt about us, he always answered vaguely, "I'm trying to sort myself out." One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. We were lying on my bed, the desk lamp casting shadows on the wall. Samuel was scrolling on his phone, face expressionless. "Samuel," I called. "What are we doing?" He looked up, a flash of confusion in his eyes. "What do you mean? We sleep together, kiss, lean on each other when you feel empty." I swallowed. "But you've never asked how I feel." Samuel set his phone down. "I don't want to hurt you. But you are," I said, voice trembling. "You just don't name it." He sat up, hands braced on the bed. "Spencer, I just broke up. I'm still a mess." "I know," I said. "But I'm not a pit stop." That sentence hung between us. Samuel closed his eyes, sighed. "I'm not ready for something serious." I laughed softly, a bitter laugh. "Then why are you serious with me in this way?" Samuel didn't answer. He just reached for his jacket. "I'm going back to my room tonight," he said. "I need to think." The door closed, leaving me alone in the quiet room. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he'd been. For the first time, I allowed myself to admit the truth. I loved him. Not because he was lonely, not because I was there at the right time, but because of who he was, messy and afraid. In the days that followed, Samuel disappeared from my life more than I'd expected. Texts thinned out, then stopped. I saw him from afar on campus, walking with friends, laughing as if everything was fine. Each time, my heart ached, because I didn't know what I'd been in his story. A week later, Samuel appeared at my door, knocking lightly. When I opened it, he stood there, face serious, eyes no longer avoiding. "We need to talk," he said. I stepped aside, letting him in. I didn't know what this talk would bring, an end or a restart. I just knew, whatever it was, I couldn't stay in that hazy zone anymore. Samuel stood in my room as if he'd never left, but also as if he'd gone far away. He didn't sit right away. He stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders slightly tense. I closed the door, leaned against it, waiting. "I've thought a lot," he began. "About you. About me." I nodded. "Me too." Samuel took a deep breath. "I've used you as a safe place when everything fell apart. I'm not sure back then if I had the courage to face my feelings, especially the ones for you." I bit my lip, trying to keep my voice steady. "And now," he looked me straight in the eyes. For the first time in a long while, that gaze didn't waver. "Now I'm more afraid of losing you than of naming this." The room was silent. I could hear my heartbeat. "Samuel," I said slowly, "I can't be a temporary healer. If you stay, I need you to stay for me. Not because you're lonely." He nodded, eyes reddening. "I know. And if I say, I want to try for real, no more hiding, would you believe me?" I didn't answer right away. I stepped forward, standing in front of him. "I'll believe through actions," I said. "Not promises." Samuel took off his jacket, placed it on the chair. It was a small gesture, but to me it felt like a decision. He moved closer, stopping at just the right distance, waiting for me to take the remaining half step. I did. This time, when we kissed, there was no experimentation. Just clarity, a slow, firm kiss like an answer. The days that followed weren't magic. We learned to be present with each other in the daylight. Samuel held my hand, crossing the campus. He introduced me to friends. No long explanations, just, "Spencer." That was enough. There were evenings he was still silent, still confused. But he didn't disappear. He stayed, spoke up, asked how I felt. One evening at the end of the semester, we sat on the steps outside the library, where it all began. The wind was cold, maple leaves falling sporadically. "Are you still afraid?" I asked. Samuel smiled faintly. "Yes, but differently now." He turned to me. "Now I'm afraid if I don't choose you." I rested my head on his shoulder. "That's enough." We didn't know what the future held after graduation, after big choices. But I knew this. Love doesn't start from someone lonely seeking you out. It starts when that person chooses to stay, even when loneliness is no longer the reason. Samuel squeezed my hand. In the golden light of the campus, I smiled. Not because the story was perfect, but because finally it was honest.